So recently I made a video talking about why I don't like the Bricklink Designer Program. And because of you guys, I learned that me and many other people don't actually know a lot about how this program works. And so I want to know more about it. I want to actually, clear up some of the misinformation that I've learned about it. And so I figured who better to do that than the head of the Bricklink Designer Program himself, Alex. Guys, please welcome Alex to the podcast studio today.
Hey, how's everyone doing? I'm Alex Kastelic. I'm the lead for the Bricklink Designer Program.
Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. We've been dealing with technical difficulties for a bit now,
All
but it
good.
seems like we're all good here. So, let's get this started off. I want to get to know you questions. You're not just part of the Bricklink program. You're
Mhm.
also a mock builder. You're also a Lego fan. So, what's a theme that you just love in the Lego space right now?
Yeah, it's easy. Anyone that knows me knows it's Star Wars. That's what I started off with back in 99 2000, and then went through a dark age period. But then the 20th anniversary, specifically the 20th anniversary Slave One, is what brought me back.
Such a
Um,
good set.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that kinda opened my eyes into how much the building techniques had progressed, and then from there, I jumped straight into mocks, and it was hit the ground running from there, so,
What's a favorite mock you've done of yours?
uh, it's gotta be it's probably my Hammerhead Corvette.
Oh,
I did, like,
nice.
a UCS scale, it's 4,000 part Hammerhead Corvette. I think that's
That's
probably just technologically or not technologically, like, from a technique standpoint, was really good. That was one of the first mocks I ever did. I was really happy with the Mando N1 that I did. I stayed up all night when it first came out on the TV show, and stayed up all night building it, and kind of just coming up with some ideas of how it should look. And I think I like designed instructions. I had them out in like a week from when it debuted on the
That's
on
actually
Mandalorian.
crazy amount of
So
time.
yeah, it was way there was some very, unproductive weeks there.
I feel like, well worth it though.
Yeah, oh, yeah, for sure.
So, all right, let's get right into talking about the Bricklink Designer Program. This is so for those who don't know what the Bricklink Designer Program is, could you just give them
Mhm.
like a little bit of information about what this program exactly is?
Yeah, so Bricklink Designer Program is a fan designed, uh, contest where we're crowdsourcing fan ideas or fan models. Working with an active palette. So what that means is they're working with elements that are currently in production through the calendar date that these models will be released. So for example, Series 10 right now, the palette is live. Those will be models that are produced in 2027. So all of those elements that are in the active palette are in production through the end of 27. um, we use their models that people are providing instructions for. So because these models are intended to be realized as they are designed currently, we require instructions because it adds just an additional layer of when fans are designing these models digitally. Another key aspect to this is all of these models are built digitally in studio. um, if you or anyone listening has built digitally in studio, you know that sometimes you can create some things that are not quite technically possible and or are really stable when built physically. And so therefore building instructions and creating the building instructions, just generally that build flow and the steps, that's something that helps designers kind of make sure that their models are realizable in a sense, or that they can be actually built. And so that's very important with us going and taking these models and physically making them into an official set. um, that's something repeatability needs to be able to exist. So that's another core aspect of it. And then I think the other biggest thing about this is that they are chosen by the fan community, in a sense that these models are voted on by the fan community. We get millions of votes each series, and those directly influence what the models are going to be. And there's some other selection criteria for it, but that is mostly due to the 2,500 part count average that we have. Because these models are all different shapes and sizes and themes and whatnot, it's really hard for us to plan from a resource standpoint how much time it's going to take to work on all of these models, right? Because there's 5 per series, there's 3 series per year. That's 15 models that my team is working on. And so the way that we can budget those resources is we do it based off a part count. So that's why we have the 2,500 part count per average, or 2,500 part count average per series. So across the 5 models, that'll be an average. The range is from 400 to 4,000 parts. So I know this is something where we get a lot of questions around, like, why are there most of the models on the larger side? And that's just, it really just comes down to the math, in a sense of, if that 2,500 part count average is what we're aiming for, the delta between 2,500 and 400 parts is a lot larger than the delta between 2,500 and 4,000, right? So typically, you're going to have models that skew a little bit larger in that sense. But then again, too, another portion of what this program is doing is, it is meant to celebrate and do all the things that are not currently happening within the core portfolio, because they are usually a little bit more niche, and or maybe something that wouldn't make sense to do in the core portfolio. I like to think of, I've used this example many times, the logging railway from series 2,
Oh,
where
yeah.
over half of the model is dedicated to just a piece of infrastructure. Like, I think if you were to see something in, I'm just going to use Lego City for example, and it was a, you probably wouldn't see a bridge, or at least 1,000
Yeah.
plus elements dedicated to just a bridge, right? But
Yeah, yeah, for
but
sure.
what's the beauty of this program is that, a fan came up with the idea, and then the fan community really liked that idea, and then we can go out and produce, 10, 12,000 of them, and it's successful, right? So
Yeah.
it's celebrating what are some of those things that are maybe a little more niche to be done by the Lego group, and from the core portfolio, or is it, it's, maybe it's something to be an accompaniment. So you see something like Siege Encampment in Series
Mhm.
4, where, like, this works really well with Lion Knight's Castle. Doesn't mean that everyone that has Lion Knight Castle wants that set. No,
I mean,
but
I'll tell you right now, as someone who's in the Castle Discord, every
yeah.
Castle fan is trying to figure out how they can get their hands on it, so
Yeah. Well, but that's, here's the nice thing though too, is that these are all made with standard elements that are readily available. The only thing that is unique to them are the stickers, in a sense. And so, um, that's another portion of this too, is that we want this to be as accessible as it can be. The limited time nature of it is just due to us moving as fast as we can. Like, we develop a model in a year and 5 months, near a year and 5 months, which is really fast in terms of
Yeah.
development, in a sense where we're only actively working on the model itself for 4 to 5 months, and the rest of the time is manufacturing the set. And we really have kind of slimmed out as much as we can, to go as fast as we can. So,
That's really cool, and so, I know a complaint I've heard a lot, and it was even something I thought, was an issue with the program at first when I first started learning about it, is that we all kinda think that Lego's heavily involved in pulling strings and being like, "Well, this set's being picked because of this." Like, how much, like, does Lego actually participate, I wanna say, in this program besides, like, sourcing parts?
mhm. I mean, yeah, outside of the actual manufacturing and fulfillment of the sets, I was gonna say the Lego group's heavily involved in that, because
Yeah.
we're utilizing all of the infrastructure, like Lego.com, et cetera, for checking out. Fulfillment is obviously done through Shop at Home. Yeah, so outside of that side of it, there's not as much as you would think. There's a lot of interaction with the Lego group around things like, making sure that we're upholding the brand guidelines of the Lego group,
Mhm.
in a sense. Like, because I know that there's an 18 plus logo on the outside of the box, that these are meant to be for, these are almost entirely designed for adult fans.
Yeah.
So you might think, oh, well, there could be more mature subject matters, captured in this. And that's the case, is that no, these are still Lego products, in a sense, and they have the Lego logo on the box. they still need to uphold the brand guidelines in a sense. So that's where you'll see, we have quite lengthy guidelines for when you're submitting a model as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And we put those there so that there is no confusion about why was my model selected or why wasn't it selected.
Mm,
I don't want there to ever be models that are like, you're putting a lot of work into these models. You're creating, not only are you working with limited palette, you're having to come up with something completely original in that we do not do any intellectual property. You're having to create instructions for those models. And
mm.
so for you to do all of that work, submit something and it not be allowed it would be a disservice to the fan community in a sense, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, so we want to make sure that everything that comes through is okay. And we
Yeah.
do see that. So we see it's this last series, I think we were at like 90 and a half. We're usually between 90 to 92%, somewhere in that range, for models that were submitted are approved to go on to voting. So that means they followed all of the guidelines.
Okay.
And so that's a really good thing, and that's something that we're really proud of, because even though we do provide all these guidelines, it seems like the fan community really appreciates that.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, we work with, we have to make sure that we are aligned with the portfolio in a sense. If something is coming out in the future, we obviously won't come out and publicly say there's a portfolio conflict here, but we do need to make sure that if something is coming down the pipeline, that we're not competing with it, because that's not the intent of
Yeah.
this program. But then, yeah, outside of that, there's a couple other like little minor things that were tied in, but we're running pretty independent in a sense, and for many different reasons. But it's we're off doing our thing over here, and it's fully to celebrate the fan community. I think there's a big aspect of it too, is that they're fan design models, right?
Yeah.
So they're not coming from Lego model designers. So even us inserting a fan designed model into the Lego development process could gum up the works, if that makes sense. Where,
Yeah.
it's a completely different type of model and a completely different type of building, that it's just we have to do things separately because the current core process doesn't align with how we develop a model in a sense. So, yeah,
Which makes a lot of sense. And so it almost sounds more like this is the Bricklink Designer Program that Lego almost sponsor or like helps out with. Like it's more
yeah,
Bricklink's, I want to say baby. Like it's their, it sounds like you guys really have control over most of what's going on. And then Lego just like once in a while steps in. And I had a question. So
mhm,
about the IP, you're talking about no IPs, which makes perfect sense. I mean, I
yep.
don't want 1,000 new Star Wars sets personally coming into the Bricklink Designer program every time. But is there ever a time where it's like, I know there was an elf build in the past where it's like, if that's too close and it's not supposed to be IP and it's just, someone building a fun fantasy
Mhm,
build or even like a dwarf or something else,
yeah.
does that ever, it's like, well, this is too close to Lord of the Rings, so we can't do it? Is there ever that kind of thing that happens or?
It wouldn't it if it was ever too close, we would probably not approve it so
Okay.
that it could go forward to voting.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I guess we've never had that discussion where it's like, "Oh, this is too much like that, so therefore, we couldn't select it as a finalist." Um, there's only a couple areas where IP gets a little tricky, and I think it's specifically around vehicles and trains, in a sense
Mhm.
where, there's a lot of different copyright and trademarks around vehicles and trains. And trains, like its whole own thing, where it gets really confusing about what's copyrighted, protected, a trademark from a train standpoint, what is and isn't. But no, we don't ever really have something where it'd be like, oh, this is elves, and there's elves in Lord of the Rings, or there's dwarves in Lord of the Rings, so you couldn't select that. um I think we also get a lot of, I guess there's something that comes up quite frequently, is kind of like the line between fantasy and castle slash medieval.
Mm.
And we generally try not to choose, we try to keep different themes, right? And so
Okay.
Castles is definitely the most popular theme. Castle and building are generally right. Building's a much more generic category, but those are kind of the two heavyweights. Castle has been heavyweight has kind of been the leader for the last few series. But we'll generally say, okay, we don't want to have multiple castle sets. We don't have multiple just plain building type sets. We want to
Yeah.
have, multiple themes represented. And so you kind of generally see there's a handful of those that are the most popular and then some others that break through. But generally my line is if it is not using castle faction torsos, then you're probably more in the fantasy realm than you
Okay.
are if you are using castle specific castle faction specific torsos. So generally, you'll see if like someone designed a wizard tower and it didn't have any castle faction elements in it, then I would say, well, you could say that's easily fantasy. It doesn't have to
Mm.
be medieval, right? If there's something like Jonas Krum's Tiny World of Wonders sets, so that's Mushroom House, Mushroom Village. Those are clearly fantasy, right? Adventure in Transylvania it's a little bit on the line there, but it's definitely fantasy. It's like Dracula, like
Yeah.
I get that like I'm contradicting myself a little bit in the sense that I think there's like a very basic Fright Night-esque um
Oh, yeah.
logo used in it, but it is 100% not a Fright Night set. So it's more of like the bats that are built into the rest of the model from an ornate and decorative standpoint. And there's
Mm.
literally a Dracula in the coming out of the tomb in the crypt. So yeah, I mean, it's gotta be, but that's where we're looking at it, where it's like, are you taking advantage of the, castle factions? Because if you are, then it's a castle set, right?
So,
Uh,
question then, would
yeah,
technically the Tavern that, Series 9, that's the one that just happened, the
yeah.
Tavern that got announced in Series 9, would that technically be considered fantasy?
Nope,
Even though it
nope, it's a castle set.
okay, it's a
So,
castle set.
yeah, and I guess I use castle, medieval interchangeably. I know
Okay.
when I know and a lot of times or I feel like the castle community say, "Well, it's not a castle," and it's like, technically, it's not a castle, but it is
But
a
it's part of, I mean, the
castle
castle theme
theme,
has
right?
technically been
Yes.
going since,
Yeah,
since the Yellow Castle. Technically,
yeah,
any theme, whether it's been Fright Nights or anything like that, has been under the castle brand,
right.
which is, and sorry, offset here, but the most generic name for a medieval theme that like anyone has done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we literally call the other one pirates, so, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. It's
another one
pirates,
just
and
space,
then some
so
of the themes are just like the most. This is it, and it's like, well, it's based on historic, and it's like, no, no, no. This is just a branded term used for all of this.
yeah. Well, I mean, even, like, a little inside baseball in the sense of, like, sometimes it's better that it is super generic like that
Mm.
because we have to think about, we're both in the US, and
Yeah.
English is our native tongue, but Lego sets are sold globally, and so even something as simple as when we name a BDP set, you'll notice sometimes the names are changing ever so slightly. We'll shorten them. And that is due to we have to translate the name of this model to how many different languages and then that also has to make sense within that language. There's a lot of different things that go into it. So sometimes it almost makes more sense that it is actually vague or it's
Yeah.
very on the nose to what this is going to specifically be called. So it because of the translations and all of the different things like that go into it.
So when I did my video, one of the comments I got a lot was that there's a handful of countries at least that BDP won't ship to. Is that I don't know if you can speak to this much of like
Yeah.
something that you guys are trying to work to in on the future so that, hopefully one day those, people can get it shipped to, or is it
hmm
just something like there's not really much we can do about it?
I think the confusing thing is that they are Bricklink sets, and Bricklink
Mhm.
operates in a lot of countries all around the world that maybe per se don't have a Lego branded retail store or
Okay.
have a Lego.com marketplace in them. And so that part of it's confusing because it's like, well, I'm in Brazil or I'm in um, in a country like South Africa or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's like, I Bricklink operates here. Why can't I purchase a BDP set? And it's the answer is as straightforward as we only operate or BDP sets because they are fulfilled through Lego.com.
Makes
They
sense.
have to have a Lego.com marketplace, and what I mean by that is there is a marketplace that you can purchase Lego sets through. I think there are some countries or territories that might have like a marketing version of Lego.com where it looks
Okay.
exactly the same, but you can't actually purchase anything on the website. Um, and so there's 36 countries that we can be fulfilled through, because I think this is Bricklink doesn't actually buy or sell in any of those other countries for the platform because everything is peer to peer.
Oh,
Right? So, like,
that
Bricklink, we
makes a
don't
lot of
actually
sense.
sell anything on Bricklink, or
Yeah.
Bricklink itself does not actually sell anything. And so therefore um, that's why we have to utilize Lego.com. Um, so
Because I'm guessing once you get into that, there's all the other, st- which we don't even need to get into because I
you
understand
get into what we
there's
spend a
so
lot
much
of our
there.
time on at Bricklink, and that is tax and compliance.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. So, I mean, with that, we're talking about, I was kind of saying, fixing that. Like, I know for the fact that there is some things you guys are actively working on fixing in the program. Like, so a big one that I only found out recently. When I first got into the program, I remember the sets were selling out,
Yep.
in 2 hours, especially the castle ones. Like if you
Mhm.
weren't there in those first 2 hours, they were gone. And, that was an issue that was happening because of that 10,000 cap. But I've heard that you guys are like extending that cap and there's these ways that you guys are improving the program. So I was, wondering what are some of the ways that you guys are actively trying to improve the program, as you guys have seen what's happened in the past and now
Yep.
are trying to make it the best program it can be.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things. So, and that's the beauty of BDP being on a cyclical kind of every 4 months, there's a new series kicking off.
Mhm.
We only have to wait 4 months to try the next thing out. So,
Mm.
that's definitely very helpful. So yeah, so for example, the quantity of sets. I see the castle in the forest behind you. So that
Yes.
kind of has kicked it all off in a sense where when that set launched, the limit was 5,000 sets.
Yeah.
And that Lego.com is not set up for limited time short run product, especially that limited.
Yeah.
And what I think it ended up selling to 10,000 in like the first 15 minutes or something like that. Like it sold so fast that by the time we could turn it off, because we're like, oh no, it sold past 5,000, it was at 10,000 already. And so then therefore everything got bumped to 10,000. Um, and then so that was 2021 invitational. We got on to 2023. It was like late 2023, I think,
Yep.
when we re-announced, or when we announced series 1 and kind of the forward-looking version of BDP. And that's where we were at 10,000 initially, and then, or sorry, we're at 20,000 because we doubled it. We said, okay, we'll do 20,000. And we were starting to look at some of the projections, and it was like, oh, this might sell out. We should go to 30,000. Looks like we have the production availability to go to 30,000. And when we did that, we still were selling out. And that was kind of the crazy thing. Whereas like we thought there's no chance that we sell out here. This is 30,000. That's a lot of sets, especially for something that is only market, it's not heavily marketed. It's not available in store shelves. You can't go into a Target or a Walmart or something like that and buy it. It's not in a Lego branded retail store. And we thought, okay, yeah, no, this is plenty. And Castle clearly, blew through that. The first series, there was a lot of excitement. So there were the train set I think Old Train Engine Shed sold out, Snack Shack sold out. I mean, it was things sold very fast. And by that time, a lot of production is already locked in place in a sense. So there's not a ton of flexibility.
Okay.
Um, for now we're working 2 to 3 years out ahead of time right now. And so when we were looking at it, we're like, this isn't the best user experience, right? You've been following along this model being developed for a year, and it's 2 in the morning in Australia or Japan, and you have to wake up. You have a job in the morning, most likely. Like, our fans are all adults with families
Yeah.
and careers and busy lives going on. It's like, this is not a great user experience, right? So that's when we looked at it with series 5 to say, what can we do to make this better? Because, like, sure, it's fun that there's this massive hype that comes through with it, and there's all this excitement around it, and we can see, oh yeah, how fast did this sell it? But it's that's not a good business. Like, we're
Mm.
while, this Bricklink is a business, and we want to do well, we also want to make sure that we are taking care of our customers and providing a great service to the fan community. And that was just not a good it was not a good solution. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board to see how could we tailor this so that we can still have the time that production needs, because even the way that we are still working currently is not the way that Lego sets are typically made. The
Yeah.
projections, and if you run out, you just make more. Like, we don't have that ability. It's a one and done production run, and we kind of have to guess. All right, this is what we or this is we can tell them at the very last minute. This is how many you need to produce. Um, and with it saying, oh well, now it could potentially go up to 50,000 is kind of the max of what we'll do, but that's based off of you know uh, what the other models are selling. There we were looking at it and say, okay, what needs to happen in order to do that? So that's what you'll see. We've shortened the crowdfunding window, so there's more time for production and supply chain team
Mhm.
to get all the elements they need on hand, to the right manufacturing facilities. Because North America sets are produced in one area, global sets are produced in a completely different area. Um, but yeah, that gave us a little bit more flexibility there. So now we can go up to 50, and thankfully we haven't had anything go past that yet, because
Okay.
I think that's basically our hard cap. But it doesn't mean
So
that
so there
every
is
set
an
can go up
actual
to
cap
50.
though, and that is important to know
Yeah, yeah,
that it's not just,
there's a
"Oh,
cap.
we could go to 100K sets,"
No, no, we're
there
not.
there
There's
is
no
a hard
plans, but
cap.
I don't think that we would ever. Maybe we could see something, but like Transylvania didn't, and Transylvania was clearly based off of everything we've seen so far. That was the highest voted, highest social mentions,
Really?
a
Okay.
lot of hype everywhere we went to conventions this year and last year was, oh my god, can't wait for Transylvania! Like, this set's so cool. It bridged multiple themes in the sense that it's kind of castle-esque, but it's also building, and it had just a very gothic nature to it that hasn't
It
really
also
been seen before or done
yeah,
by
it
the
also
Lego
had that,
group.
like,
So yeah.
adventurers feel to it, like
Yeah, yeah,
Giant
it had kinda
Fire.
all kinds of stuff with it. So, it had a lot of crossover, we should say. So, but yeah, so getting back to the production levels, it's we'll take it, and we know based on the first couple hours of sales where something is going to trend to from a sales
Okay,
standpoint, because most of our sales happen day 1. And then the last 24 hours. But
okay.
we can see, okay, this set, it's trending towards 10,000, 10 to 15,000, somewhere in there. And that's where most sets will generally end up, is that 10 to 15,000 range. That's kind of where we expect it to be.
Yeah,
Um, if it's going that way, then that means, okay, another set that might be performing well, we can borrow some of the production that's not going to be used by those other sets, because generally we say we plan for 30,000 across the board, because
okay.
contractually, when working with the fan designers, we will produce up to 30,000 of every, or we guarantee production of 30,000 sets, assuming there's demand for it, right? But as soon as we see that demand isn't there, then we'll just start allocating that demand to other models that are seeing more. But it's generally a floating number or a traveling number based on how each of the 5 models are faring, in a sense, where if all 5 models hit 30,000, then we wouldn't go above 30,000 for any of them, right? If they're all trending towards 30,000, then we're going to be like, all right, we're going to leave it, because we have to
Yeah,
guarantee that everyone gets that 30,000. If there's one that's trending towards 10, then it's like, okay, well, we can allocate 20,000 across the remaining. Does that mean
yeah.
if it's one's running, then we're going to let it run? But that might mean there's 2 or 3 that are sharing that if they all ran at the same speed. Um, so
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, but
So
then that way too, it allows, our friends that are, globally. If you're in Australia, you don't have to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's like
yeah,
it will be there when you wake up in the morning. It'll be there, right? And kind of knock on wood. It's all the Series 5 and Series 6. Every model's been available for the entire week.
yeah,
Period. And maybe it's on us to make sure that more people are aware of these sets, that these sets are available that week, and there's some quality of life things that we'll do behind the scenes to make that easier, to set reminders and such. But yeah, it should be, if you want to purchase it that week, you can purchase it. It's available. There's a temporary authorization that's put on your card. You're not actually charged for the
yeah.
model until it ships. So there's still 5 to 6 months to make sure you have the funds allocated for it. So
So really, there's two points I want to talk about
mhm,
here real quick. There's the first point of like, first off, to all the people watching, guys, that is your sign. Like, you don't, as he was saying, you don't need to wake up at 2 in the morning anymore.
mhm,
There is time to get these sets, and you do have that week to get them. Now,
mhm.
I know for me, like a week sometimes isn't enough time, but also the point you're making is that if you want to cancel, you cancel. If you are like, hey, because like for me, I can't think of what I'm doing in a month. I can't think of what my
Mhm.
financial state and all this other
Yeah,
stuff
yeah, yeah.
is. So it's like sometimes it's really hard for like I almost got the Wolfpack set and I was like, I just don't know where I'm gonna be in 6 months.
Mhm.
And so I didn't want to drop the money. But what you're
Yep.
saying is like if you need to kind of back off the reins and go,
Yeah.
ooh, life's kind of hitting me, it's getting me down, you can just kind of hit that like you're not actually being charged for that payment basically because I've
Yep.
heard of people who can cancel that. So
Yeah, yeah, and now too, we're doing excess set sales too, where in a sense I mean, it's very low inventory. It's kind of
yeah,
our safety stock and canceled orders from after we place the production order. But then I guess that's technically a second option, or a kind of second chance at some of those sets.
yeah.
But yeah, so there's multiple ways of in a sense where, yeah, I highly recommend, if you want the set or you think you want the set, pre-order it, and then you'll guarantee your spot, because yeah, it does. That 1 week is kind of the one downside, is like, well, to make sure that
Yeah.
everyone can get access to it if they want it, it's got to be a shorter time period. But yeah.
And you were talking about marketing, which is something that because I remember when the series first started happening, I barely knew when anything was going on. And I struggle sometimes because I'm like, if I'm not following it closely, if I'm not a hardcore
Mhm,
BDP fan, I just don't feel like I know what's really going on.
mhm.
And only recently when I've actually like started, actually kind of looking at what's going on, do I really know what's happening. Is there any ways you guys are working on trying to improve marketing for it? Maybe, content creators or other people, like, is there,
Yep.
what are ways that you guys are trying to do to just get the word out there to other Lego fans?
There's a couple things that we're working on with that, but it's also good to note though that some of that is intentional in a
Mm,
sense too, because of the type of product that we're working with here, where it is a fan designed model. We're not going to market it through the typical channels that we market a core portfolio
yeah.
product, in a sense, right? So we are squarely targeted towards high affinity fans, and there are probably some medium affinity fans that kind of fall into that net.
Mm,
But in general, when we're marketing out, we're going out, we're trying to stay in the niche, in a sense. We're trying
mm,
to stay, we don't want to go out and cast a really broad net, because then people are going to get into the product and be like, what is this? Why is this completely different? We want them to know, hey, we know you know what you're getting into with this, in
yeah.
a sense, rather than, oh, I saw this, I bought this, it looks cool. This is nothing like the other Lego set that I just bought the other day. What's going on? Why is this different? We want you to kind of be informed before you're purchasing this set, in a sense. And so therefore, by marketing it, we want to tailor that a little bit more, so that it's truly meant for the high affinity fans that are looking for something to, looking for that next thing. So
It's almost, I saw a great comment in my video when I did it about someone talking about is like, they're not a mock builder and they love castle so
mhm,
they get the set, the castle sets do BDP because it's, I mean, it's basically a mock, that's what
mhm,
you're selling.
Yep.
And so, I've noticed so many people who are just like, I love it because I'm not a big mock builder and I just want just a set that I can build. Like it's basically it's cheaper, it's easier than having to go out and get all the parts yourself or
Yep.
rebrickable and then putting it together. So, yeah, no, it's makes sense that you're targeting that sort of audience, the fans who are already fans who just want a little something extra.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that's a great way to look at it because it's there's multiple things I think that you get from building a mock. It's a different type of building.
mhm,
You That's how I learned. That's how I kind of really honed my design skills when I got back into building Lego again. And that was going on Rebrickable and building a whole bunch of other mocks and
yeah.
seeing like, oh, this is what is acceptable quality for mocks. So I'm like, oh, this is this is sketchy, and then you go build other ones, you're like, oh no, this is much more, I can see kind of the line, like this is kind of getting closer to it. But I think too, from a technique standpoint, the way that AFOLs will build, there's some kind of more novel and interesting uses for parts
Mhm.
that if we are only working with a high affinity fan base that is looking for that specifically, right? A truly 18 plus sense in the sense of like skill level.
Yeah,
We can do some other things with that. Um, and I think too that the other part of it is it may not make sense to have some of the other kind of like adult city-esque sets that we do.
yeah.
There's not enough demand for them in the core portfolio, but somebody is like, I want 6 of these a year. Well, BDP can maybe fulfill a handful of those for you. And then Rubricable or some of the other, means of buying mock instructions, that exists as well. So it's an area where we're filling in that gap in the sense of there's a gap in the market, and that's kind of what this is meant to do. At the main time too is again, back to the first question, is celebrating the fan community, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's elevating fan designs and things that, if you sold 10,000 instructions to a model, you'd be like, "That was the best selling set of all time," right?
Yeah.
Whereas when we do it as 10,000, is like we're moving well past 10,000 on some specific models, but it's like that seems incredible that this is a fan designed model and it has that much, movement behind it. So yeah.
Yeah. That is, like when you put it that way, it is really cool because it's just like, because I mean, also you guys are taking care of all the marketing, like a lot of it is like,
Mhm.
production of all that. Whereas if someone did it on their own, like, they could send 10,000 instructions, but they can't get the parts to the people and all that. So it is
Yeah.
really cool. And it's,
Yeah.
when you really think about it, it's like this person designed a set, they did all this work, and suddenly a lot of people get to enjoy a build that
Mhm.
they made, which is really cool. Um, so one of the other issues I have personally had about the Bricklink Designer Program, and I'm pretty sure you guys have fixed this. I know when that set came out, there was
Mhm.
issues where people didn't get the sticker sheets in it because that is the unique part of the set.
Mm.
And when they called customer support, they couldn't get it. Is that something you guys? I know, like I've heard it's gotten better, but I was just wondering if you guys happen to have any um, insight on that at all.
Yeah, no, there everything, so it operates exactly like this, like it's the same Lego consumer shopper engagement team that's handling
Okay.
everything. So it should be exactly the same. I think over the years there's much more awareness as to what Bricklink and Bricklink Designer Program sets are. Where I think one of the challenges historically was that because the product isn't visible in the system anymore, then it's very easy to just be like,
Okay.
"Oh, is this isn't available anymore." And it's like, "No, they're available. They're set aside, but that initial status code that you might see could be confusing if you weren't aware of what BDP is. Now that BDP's been around for a while, we're not seeing a lot of those issues
Okay.
anymore, or at least not that I've seen. I mean, obviously we still have one-off, quality issues where like maybe a sticker sheet's crumpled, or a part was missing from a bag, or was swatched out, or switched out for something else or something like
Yeah.
that. They're one-off things. They're not, oh my god, every set had, and then they're not sending them out. But no, everything else should be running basically exactly the same. We go through all the same quality checks and quality
Yeah.
processes. If there were issues like that, then it would be red alarms going off all over the place because corporate quality would be looking at it. It's not us fulfilling it, but
Yeah, for sure.
our the manufacturing facilities would would definitely be getting some heat. So
So basically, what I'm hearing, just for you fans out there who are listening to this right now, if you do
yeah.
have those issues where there is a piece missing,
Mhm.
just call
Yep.
customer support. You should be able to explain your situation. From the sounds of it,
Yep.
they should be able to fix that for you. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, no, so it's the reason I bring that up is just there was, things that I talked about where it's like, hey, I want to know how, if these are issues,
Yeah.
'cause I know
Yeah.
they were an issue when I was originally, getting into it. And now I'm like, hey, I want to, because I know many other people have had that confusion.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and,
yeah,
and too, like if you look at Castle in the Forest and a lot of the
mhm,
2021 invitational sets, you don't see that that was more of those 15 sets that came out was more of a pilot program in a sense,
yeah,
because if you go back to the AFOL designer program, ADP, that was
mhm,
done by Bricklink pre-acquisition.
yeah,
And then the 2021 invitational was done as how would we do this internally? So it was kind of more of a
okay,
pilot. And then now the series onward has been all right, we have the learnings from the 2021 design or invitational into how do we do this as an ongoing kind of program. And so yeah, there's definitely I because the boxes are very similar and just the general nature of people seeing those sets and those sets being out and about,
yeah,
um, there is a little bit of confusion as to like, well, some of the pain points and challenges from that initial pilot, are maybe still in our memory as
yeah,
we're talking about, well, now we're on to series 9 and 10.
yeah,
But yeah, most of those things, like even we think about like going back to series one, the difference between series one and series four had a significant change in just
mm,
when we crowdfunded series one and we showed the final set images. There was a lot of like, hey, I thought you were going to do more with this. We were like, all right, we're going to keep it 99% the same. We'll go through and correct any of like the major stability issues, techniques that are stressing elements beyond what it's meant to do, etc. And we didn't change anything else. And then that's why you'll see series 4, that's where we added a lot of creative fixes because we were still in the point where it was voting and crowdfunding, or sorry, we were voting and modifying the models, or doing the work on the models right as we were crowdfunding series 1, and we could see the feedback coming back from the initial fan media reviews and the final set photos and whatnot. And so it was like, okay, well, we'll gladly do some work on these. I mean, we can work with the fan designer. They can get creative with this and maybe have a little bit more time to flesh out the designs in a sense. And
yeah,
so, for example, like I know one of the criticisms about Mount Fortress was that it didn't have enough minifigures in it, and it didn't have the detail on the inside was maybe a little lacking. And so that's why you'll see, we went from series 4, it was like, oh, okay, we don't have a limit in how many minifigures you can use. We do for the submission part because
okay,
we don't want it to be a 400 part model with 20 minifigures in it, right? And like
yeah,
the amount of minifigures is what drives the voting process.
mm,
But after a model is selected as a finalist, we'll go through and do whatever makes sense. Like I think Lost City was kind of one of those that was right on the tail end of us making some changes in series 3, but that model only had 2 minifigures, even though it was a 3,000 part set. And so
yeah,
people were like, "Well, it's a really low amount." It's like, well, it's their lost ruins. Like, do we do we expect to have a full tourist group in here, or like what's the proper way to do that? So we always try to take that into context of like
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
how many minifigures should be in this model, or like is there an area of this model that like, hey, this could use a little bit more thought into it in a sense,
Mhm.
or we once we're getting through and we're designing stickers with the Lego graphic designer, um maybe some ideas come up and it's like, oh, okay, well that might be cool. Let's go back to the fan designer and give them this kind of prompt, and then let them come with something creative for that,
That's
per
really
se.
cool.
So Yeah, we, we're always trying. It should always be driven by the fan designer, right? Because it's their name on the box in a sense.
Mm. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
their model. We want them to own it, but we can help kind of um, guide them with some ideas for like if you want to think about story, this is something you might want to consider, or there's this might be a really cool play feature to add.
Yeah.
So we did that with the gold mine in series 6, where there was a lot of or there was some space on the inside of the mine where it was static. It was kind of like a static gold deposit vein. It was like, wouldn't it be cool if there's all this dynamite like around? What if we had a play feature where you push the dynamite and the wall blows out? Like,
That's I
so
love
those
that.
are the types of things that we'll try to provide some guidance on, and then the fan designer will come back and be like, okay, this is what we think we could do. you know so
I don't know if you can really talk about this, and I can cut this out if needed.
no,
But
you're
I
good.
know with the recent set, with the Tavern, there was a lot of people didn't like that. I'm pretty sure the logo was AI. When that
Yes, yeah.
goes to design, I'm guessing a Lego fan designer will come in and kind of make it their own,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, and I was kinda surprised by the reaction to this. I think I missed it in the live reveal or the finalist reveal because I was doing some background stuff during
Yeah,
that interview, but
I understand.
I think the fan designer mentioned something that it was like the sticker artwork was AI generated or something like that, and yeah, I mean, to me, I look at it and be like, it's a great tool to level the playing field for fan designers in a sense of I I'm thinking about myself making stickers, and it would be like
Same,
they're like
same.
horrible Microsoft Paint, like like terrible stick
We're gonna
figure
take an image, we're
stickers.
gonna cut it out, and then like
Right.
slap it on there, and it's gonna
Yeah.
look like
And
paper mache.
and I know that's something that the fan community has, or at least some of the fan designers, I should say, the fan designers that I'm working with and doing the webinars with and doing office hours and all these things. And it's like they not everyone has graphic design skills,
Yeah,
right? And so that can be kind of a limiting factor for some models or for some people. So to me, I'm like, if you're using AI for it, then like that's a great tool for you to do that, right? It is not going to be in the production.
yeah,
All of our stickers are always redesigned. I mean, you can go back and look at what the original models looked like, and we work with a Lego graphic designer to Legoize isn't a term, but to make sure that the stickers meet the Lego guidelines in the sense of like the very semantic details of like our the colors that we're using are Lego
yeah.
colors. The detail will actually show up if it's printed that small. Is
Mhm.
that even possible to print on a sticker? A lot of
Yeah,
times, you got to make sure that there's the space for the border all the way around it. When you make the space for the border all the way around, the detail's too small. Um, there's like the weighting of lines, the font, like font, we have to have the license to use the font. So we have a certain amount of fonts that we can kind of doctor up. But there's a lot of really like semantic little details like that we have to go through. So even just taking the fan design stickers, we will always redesign them. Same with the instructions. We'll always
yeah,
redo them, and the fan designer will not be responsible for that portion of it. But yeah, so I guess I know there's a lot of pushback on AI, but to me, I'm like, it levels the playing field. It's not us using AI. So
yeah. And I guess like I'll say this because I agree. I mean, it's a very as someone who works with a lot of art, and suck at design. My thumbnails are the closest I can do to actual graphic design, but like I understand it's very hard for some people who can't draw, and they also maybe don't have friends or connections who can do the
yeah,
artwork. So maybe to the fan designs out there, like, hey, maybe be willing to not stress that as much. Like if you
yeah,
need to use some other tools and stuff, like
yeah,
you shouldn't have to go out and be paying for specialized artwork because if it does win, don't worry. Like from the
yeah,
sound, you're gonna get to work with an amazing Lego designer, graphic
yeah,
designer who's probably has loads of experience. So
yep,
like definitely, I don't know. That's just something that I was thinking. I was like, I've heard people stress about it. It's like, oh, I'm doing this to get the artwork in. It's like maybe
yep.
just Not that's not the thing that you need to worry about the most. Maybe make a good model and stress the art the
Yeah,
next time.
no, and yeah, we're redoing almost everything in that
Yeah.
sense. So it's yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I guess, a non-issue, but, you know.
Yeah. No, I
But
completely.
without us having a conversation about it, then it's easy to speculate, like, "Oh, yeah, well, then I wonder if they're doing AI for this or that," and it's like, "Well, no, that was the fan design portion of it." So, if it was something on our website, that I'd be like, "Yeah, that's probably an issue there."
Yeah, exactly. Oh, for 100%. Yeah, it's a fan submission. Some
Yeah,
fan has to do what they got to do to
yeah,
get this thing submitted. So I completely understand. I want to really quickly bring up one point, and
yeah,
I talk very quickly about this because I want to get on to a more important topic. Instructions. Now, I have
yeah,
a hard time because I like to get away from my devices.
yeah,
I I work in not like IT. I work with technology all the time. I like to get away from it. So when I open up a Lego set, I like physical instructions. Now I do understand, and I didn't realize this until lately, it would actually I heard it would increase the price if you guys put physical instructions in. So I was wondering if you just
mhm.
very quickly speak to that of why it's digital versus physical.
Yeah, price is only one factor in it,
Okay.
but the bigger factor is the time. So
Okay.
we know that if we were to add printed building instructions, the portion of the process of where you would be working on finalizing printed instructions and getting those off to manufacture, and then get those ready to be when they would be packed into a set and shipped off, would
Mm,
add 3 months to our development timeline. And so now we're talking about a year and 5 months, now going to a year and 8 months. And this is
wow.
also during the time period where you would be placing your pre-orders.
Hmm.
So now the pre-order window goes from 5 months to 8 months, and that is a big
Yeah.
problem. So, the we did a year. It was about a year pre-order with the 2021 Invitational, and there's a lot of kind of downstream chaos that happens from that.
Mm.
You have all kinds of things with credit card authorizations, and payment declines, and there's global, like, trade laws, in the sense of, I guess trade laws might not be the right word for that, but
Okay.
um like, you can only have credit card authorizations on hand for so long, and then basically everything has to be reprocessed again, so then the user has to then reach back out to the Lego group to reauthorize the card to be trans to do it again. And it was like 5 months was, all right, this is has to be under 6 months essentially. And so that is by far the biggest reason that we don't do it. Is there's a lot of production related things that come with it, in the sense of, um, it's it adds a lot of hurdles in the manufacturing of the set. So, for example, you'll see that when we send sets out, for example, Series 5 just started shipping at the end of October. The launch date for that set is November 1st. But we started shipping those sets as soon as they hit the warehousing.
Okay.
It was like October 21st, something like that. Like, we
Okay.
don't actually have to wait for the street date. It doesn't really make sense, right? Because the
Yeah.
set's already paid for. You're waiting for an artificial date just that says, okay, November 1st is our launch date. We need a launch date internally because of the way that our manufacturing systems and
Yeah.
technology works. But um, we want to get that out to you as soon as possible, right? So, there's all these little things that we try to do to make sure we can get this out as fast as possible. And the longer that you're sitting there and waiting for it, it's like, a series is already a year and a half. Like, that's a really long
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
We don't or fans don't typically see the development cycle of a core product, in a sense. For, like, you see a Star Wars set, or even something that's internally IP owned, or like a Creator 3-in-1 or something like that. The development cycle for those is much longer. So,
Yeah.
but you only see it a month before it's released, right? When it's like, here's the final set photos, and this will be out soon. And there's a little bit of pre-order. Some sets are available for pre-order and others are not. But yeah, so we're doing all of our development out in the open, so it's like, it seems really long, and so to make it even longer would just be it would- it would be a big challenge. But I do understand the feedback of, like, it is nice having a physical instruction booklet. But the other side of it is, we're focusing on digital brick building in the sense
Yeah.
of utilizing Studio, so everything is done through Studio. It allows us to be a little bit more accessible in a sense, right? Because everyone doesn't have to have all of the elements on hand. And so, therefore, everyone can, whether you're a college student or you're in a small apartment or, you know, elements, having a large amount of elements can be very expensive. And so, it's like if you want to design, you want to participate, that was kind of the more digital nature of the program
Yeah.
too to begin with. So I guess that's another aspect with it as well. So there's a handful of reasons, but again, I think it's one of those things where when we have a conversation about it, it makes a lot more sense. Whereas we're
It
just like,
does.
oh,
It
we're just
really
being cheap
does.
and not including it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's not really the answer, but it's easy to speculate that, right?
Yeah. And I'm learning a lot that production plays a big part into all of this. Like a lot of the issues I've had, I've learned, I'm learning it's like, you know, the reason it's only open for a week, production,
Mhm,
the reason you can
mhm.
do this many production. And it's like that makes so much sense because if you have to extend that production by, let's say it's 3 years, someone has to wait to get that set.
Yeah,
That makes it a lot harder. And you're right, Lego does. I mean, we have heard of it's like, it takes 2 to 3 years or even more time to
yeah,
make a set. So of course, when you're trying to cut that whole process down so that people can get that set in a good amount of time, it makes perfect sense that it would be production related issues that are
yeah.
make forcing you guys to do that. So that's
Well, I guess
yeah,
another thing to think about is that the Bricklink Designer Program is extremely small in the grand
yeah,
scheme of
oh yeah,
the Lego Group. I mean, if we are a speed bump in the system, that is a problem, right? Because the while there's it has been successful over the years, it's still very 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 small, and so we are kind of operating outside of the core process in a sense. So if we are making waves, then that's a problem, right? Because now we're
yeah,
starting to affect this much larger spinning wheel that's in place. So yeah, that's where we try to always find like how are the ways that we can work within the boundaries that we kind of have defined so that we don't kind of put a stick in a tire in a sense.
yeah, for sure.
We need to find, all right, what are the creative ways that we can solve some of these problems like the forecasting or the forecasting and our demand that we're
Mm,
seeing. We've when we put that in place and even for the next few years out, it's like our manufacturing window is set.
yeah,
So, how do we best utilize that space, or what can we do with those partners to see, all right, if we tweak this, what will you need? And then is that acceptable? And so that's how
yeah,
we get to pilot something like um, having the kind of the real time production allocation, or we piloted this year as well the excess stock in the sense
mhm,
of, hey, we had leftover sets and these are some of these are so if your package is lost or damaged when it's shipped, like we can replace it. um or you have people that canceled orders. It's like, okay, so what do we do with these? Well, what happens when we put 400 sets up on lego.com? Do they sell out immediately? Like, is this even possible? Is it acceptable that, fans are going to know going into this that like there are going to be canceled orders because the system just isn't literally set up to be taking 1,000 orders a second?
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of little things like that that we're always like, we try to put as many disclaimers out ahead of time to be like, be careful, like just know that we're trying something here. We appreciate your patience. Let's see how this goes, because at the end of the day this will be beneficial for a lot of users, but some might find this tedious, or they might have an issue with it. But as long as 90% of people have a great experience with it, then we know we're heading in the right direction. We can tweak it and make refinements, and then move on. So
And a big point from all of that is you guys are constantly trying to make sure that that user experience is good, and you're not just going, well, they're selling, so who cares? Like it, and I love to hear that. I love to hear that you guys are actively trying to make sure that people can get into it, buy a set, and it's smooth and
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. We could milk it for a year,
oh,
I think, do
oh yeah,
15 castle sets and then just obliterate the market for it. But that wouldn't be the point of the program, right? I mean, we would
exactly.
be like, sure, one very, I guess a subsection of the BDP fandom would be extremely excited about that, but everyone else would be like, wait, what?
When are we gonna get
Yeah.
15 castle sets in a year? I'm very curious about this. Like, how can I make sure this happens?
Not from BDP. I can promise you that. That's the only thing I have control over. But I
Yo,
mean,
fair.
we've basically had uh
It's been about
there's only
every
been a
year.
couple series that we haven't. I think series 2, series 5 is debatable. We had 2 in series 4, which was an
Yeah,
anomaly. Series 7, we didn't have a oh wait, no, we have a castle set, series 7.
yeah.
6, 7. Oh yeah, 6, 7, 8, 9 have all
They've
had a castle
had
set.
that one.
Yeah.
Now, I have two very important questions I want to ask
Yeah.
here, and they're very different. So I'm going to start with the one that's going off of this about Castle. So
Mhm.
Castle fans are they're like Star Wars fans, but for original IP. And they love their Castle. As a big Castle fan, who's someone who's
Hey,
in,
we are passionate. That is okay.
yes, that is exact. That is nothing wrong with that. So I see a lot of people who, and actually, now that I think about it, these questions to go to bed, a lot of people who are like, well, so in this past wave, there was a really large Kraken castle
Mhm.
that I know a lot of
There were
people are like,
several.
this is amazing. Why
Yeah.
why didn't this win? But the one below it won.
Mhm.
Is like, what I guess my question is like, how does that work? Of just like,
Mhm.
well, a large castle set's not winning because it's not based on well, we got to pick one. We're gonna take a castle set. I guess we're gonna stick that in the 400. It's like it's more competing for price points rather than
In a sense.
actual. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we talk about that, and then I'll ask my second question.
Yeah. So I've talked through this through the webinars a couple times too.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of complex and it doesn't always necessarily make sense, especially when
Yeah.
you factor comments in. Because if you look at specific models, there'll be a ton of comments on them, and you'd be like, "Oh, this is definitely going to win. It has so many more comments than everything else."
Yeah.
I've been very clear about this. Comments are not factored into anything that we do from a standpoint. The only correlation to the amount of comments on a model is that it is somebody with a large social media following. Almost, 99 out of 100 times. All that means is that it's somebody with a large social media following, and therefore a lot of they'll post on their Instagram or YouTube channels or
Yeah.
whatever, and then people will come over and say like, awesome, love it, blah blah blah, right? And then you'll have other models where it's like there's 15 comments on it and this is a finalist. How is that possible?
Yeah.
um that's generally what we see. um and then I guess I've talked about this as well, is that some people will say, well, those people with large social media followings, have an unfair advantage.
Mm.
And what we see is that those individuals that have a larger social media following, when they are direct linking from, let's just say, from Instagram, and they're direct linking to their model to vote for their model on BDP, we see that traffic. We know on
Okay.
average, those users are voting on that model plus 80 other models that they're also voting on. But if you just organically come to bricklink.com and then go to vote, you're only voting on 50 models or something like that. So
Okay.
we're seeing we've used this expression where it's like a rising tide lifts all boats type of thing,
Yeah.
in a sense where yes, we do have some um, past finalists who that have a large social media following. Generally, it means they're probably a really good model designer, right? Like,
Yeah.
because if you think historically, they've been building up this following over years because they've been posting really good mocks. Um, but yeah, and you'll see those types of things come out. But in general, voting is voting is the driving factor always, right? In the
Okay.
sense of how many votes does a model have? So let's go back to this series. So series 9, the finalists that we just announced, Fisherman's Village would be the highest voted set.
Yeah.
and that is also a 4,000 part set. So generic building, we should say, so like building category is basically blocked for the rest of the models downstream on the voting, because we
Mhm.
take like a list of we take the list of here are the highest voted models all the way down, and then you have the theme for all of those models, and we'll work our way down. So if the top model at 4,000 parts is the top model is 4,000 parts, well then most 4,000 part models after that are likely not going to be selected because they won't
Okay.
fit that average 2,500 part count.
So to go with that, I'm just going to
Yeah.
use an example here. So which that means is basically the votes were kind of split on all the big castle ones. No one could really
Eh,
decide which big castle one they wanted. And, let's say for castle
Yeah.
fans. And so because of that, something that's more generic that a wider audience would love, they all voted for that big one. So the 4,000 piece set basically went to that instead of a castle one because castle
M-
fans couldn't out.
Maybe I don't know necessarily that I agree with that 100%
Okay. Okay.
because
No. Under,
I mean, if you only had one vote, then I would 100% say, yeah, there's probably too many Kraken castle sets, or let's just say 4,000 part castles. We don't want to just pigeonhole it to
well,
just Kraken sets, but let's just say 4,000 part castle sets. If you only had one vote, then there would be like a cannibalization concern, right? But you can put love it on every single one of them, and so therefore it doesn't necessarily mean that there were too many Kraken castles, and so therefore that was the problem why it didn't get to the top. Because historically, the largest set isn't always castle.
for yeah, which
Now,
is understandable.
30 out of the top 50 in voting might be castle sets consistently, but that doesn't mean the top set is always a castle set, right? So if you go back and look at 4,000 part sets or any of the
Yeah.
largest sets, those are typically the highest voted set for each series.
Okay.
So, you'll see like in series two, it was Brick Cross. In series three, it
Mm,
was Art of Chocolate was the highest voted set. But you had but that was I want to say Art of Chocolate, was it like high 2,000 part count somewhere in there?
I don't
So
remember off the top of my
as
head.
you go down the list, four strongholds right there at at
Yeah,
at a high part count, and it's still available. The high part count's still available because Art of Chocolate didn't take the high part count with the first
which
pick,
makes
if that makes
sense.
sense,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then, but you will also see that sometimes there are series with multiple 4,000 part sets. So, for
Mhm.
example, if you look at series 8 with Dustmark and with
That's the
Academy of Science or
yes.
University of Science, University of Science, and that's something where we will take a look at number one set or highest voted set we'll take, and then we'll go down that list to see where is the first small set.
Mm,
So for this series, we go down the list and we say, okay, what's the first set sub 1,500 elements? And that should always be a finalist too, assuming it doesn't conflict with the theme of the first selected series,
right, which
right?
makes sense.
So we go down the list. There it is. Pumpkin Patch is the first one. So Pumpkin Patch is the highest voted set. I think Pumpkin Patch was like the highest voted sub 2,500 part set. Um,
Okay.
and so then we say, okay, boom, there's your medium, or sorry, your small set. And then we'll also look at the list to see, is there anything else like maybe right below that, or the general next 10 to 20 models that would be maybe in the 1,400-ish part range?
Yeah.
Because if you have something like that where that is also highly voted, then that can offset another 4,000 part set. So then
Oh,
theoretically, you could go and take if the second highest voted set on the list is a 4,000 part castle set, then it's like, oh, that's available. We can do that because there's another set down here that's also highly voted on the smaller side. Because you have to remember too that like the votes typically skew more, or the higher voted sets are typically larger sets because they're more detailed, right? So your highest voted low part set might be like the you could say it's sometimes it's been as high as like maybe number 8, and other times it's been, it could be as low as, in the 40s or something like that. That doesn't mean that it's not a set that people like. It just means it's smaller voted sets generally are not voted as highly as uh, the larger voted sets. So I think then
Yeah.
people get confused and say like, "There's no way this was the fifth highest voted set." It's like, no, it wasn't. And nowhere near have we ever said that it was the fifth highest voted set.
Yeah.
It's the highest voted set for its size, right?
Which makes
It's the
sense.
highest voted set for that category or that theme. And so then you just kind of work your way down. And so in the webinars, I will always talk about like your part count is always going to be one of the limiting factors when you're designing. So, like, if you're
Yeah.
designing a 4,000 part set, you're competing against every other model out there, regardless of theme,
That's a good point.
right? So, that's a challenging point. I will typically say that if you want the best chance, design a 2,500 part model or a
Mm,
22 to 2,800 part model because you're not moving the needle, that average needle, you're not moving it, right? Because if it could be technically up to 3 of those models selected, or
yeah.
in like series 4, there could be 5 of those models, right? We didn't have a small model, we didn't have a big model, we just had 5 medium models. Um,
Which
and
makes
that could work
sense.
out based
Yeah.
off of that series. The highest voted sets were medium models, and there wasn't a small model that could offset, so we couldn't even like get down the list to a bigger model. Um, so the voting can be all over the place in a sense. So it doesn't mean that those castles weren't highly voted. It could have been number 2.
Yeah.
The model you're thinking of could have been number 2, and it's like, well, it was blocked because the number 1 voted model was a 4,000 part fisherman village, and there wasn't enough small models to offset it in the top votes, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And I guess my point when I was saying like the votes were split was more of they couldn't decide between a Kraken and Griffin, and a lot of the people were like, "Well, I'm a massive Griffin fan, so I'm not gonna vote for any of the Kraken ones," and I don't
Yeah.
who knows? But
It,
honestly, the
it,
point I like that you're making here is if you want a better chance, maybe make a smaller model because and
yeah.
then if that big large one gets picked, then you'll have a better chance with one of those smaller ones.
It's hard because I Castle is also a hard one too, where it's like
Yeah.
because of the votes and the way that it works, it's pretty. It's I mean, like a small castle set, unless we were like to really, we would have to break the process to be like we're going to pick a small castle set.
Yeah.
Like this is a problem in the sense that BDP sometimes is democratic to a fault, in the sense
Yeah,
where it's
that's
like
true.
the crowd is choosing what they want, but you don't necessarily always agree with the crowd.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that it's
for
like,
sure.
oh God, another 4,000 part castle set. And it's like, well, historically, that's what people are voting for, right? Because there's that wow and that ooh factor of seeing this giant model, and then the reality comes a year later. You're like, oh no, this is a $350 model. like,
And
like
I
this
have
is
to put a spot in
expensive,
his
right?
name.
But I do feel like there is kind of some self-regulation that we're seeing within the fan community, because it doesn't necessarily always mean that it's like that there's we're seeing models voted highly, but like something like the Sleepy Dragon Inn, that was like
Yeah.
it's right there at the top, because in order to be selected as castle set, you're up there at the top, right?
Mhm.
um it to be a smaller castle set, that's really hard to climb up to be a sub 2,000 part, because it's like that's got to be an awesome idea. And so for example, like series 4 with siege encampment, like that was such a novel
Yeah.
awesome idea that people were like, oh my god, that's so cool. And then same with medieval seaside market, it did the same thing where it was like, that's Lion Knight, but it's so cool because it's different than what we've we've ever seen from
Yeah.
a castle set before, but it also goes really well with Lion Knight's castle. And both of those sets kind of did something where it's like, hey, that's really cool. I like that I can add that on to a set that I already have. I think that always does really well. I think that was something for like Alchemist Shop, where I think there was like you see a little bit of the discourse, and people are like, "Oh, this kind of looks similar to like
The
it's
blacksmith.
inspired from the medieval blacksmith set." And it's like, the designer will tell you that was his inspiration for designing it. and you see, well, how did this get, how did this get voted up so much? And it's like, because people see that they have another set that they can put next to the medieval blacksmith.
That's very fair.
And so therefore, like, the silent crowd or silent majority of the crowd is like, I love that I can do that, not, oh, we already have something like this. I need X, or,
Mm,
something that's a little bit more tailored for your specific collection. The things that do really well, at least from what I've seen in Castle, is that they're doing something that hasn't been done before. So,
okay.
for example,
Dustmark Keep was a big one that I noticed. I love how that one looks.
yeah, the desert, like, and going back to series 1, Mountain Fortress, doing a castle in a completely different setting from everyone
Mm,
else, where it's like, it's not another gray castle in a green environment, right?
yeah,
Like, I get that castles are, it's really cool with seeing people doing things of castle, and it's not just all gray, right?
yeah.
Like, we get that it's castles are typically gray. But the idea that Mountain Fortress was in kind of this frozen climate and it's up on top of a mountain, like, that's completely different than what you're experiencing with the Lion Knight's castle. And it seemed like the perfect counterfaction, right? And so
Yeah.
you can see
Oh, for
why
sure.
that rose to the top, right? Because sometimes it's a handful of votes that are making the difference in this, in a
Mhm.
sense. And so that's why I always stress, like, play features, story, those things go will those, especially in castle, those little things were just that little bit extra to help you differentiate from everyone else. um if you're going to do a lion knight castle, like, for or sorry, if you're going to do a lion knight faction thing for BDP, when those elements were available, it was like, if you just do a lion knight another castle, people are gonna be like, "I already have a Lion Castle," or "There's
Sure.
one already available." Like,
Yeah.
it will probably do well in voting, but it won't be enough to put it over the edge, if that makes sense.
No, that makes
Um,
a lot of sense.
and something like Dustmark, where it was, this is a desert environment. You're doing something unique with the faction. Although I think it's the if you saw any of the fan media day
I did.
videos,
I
there's the
did.
it's designed a little bit differently, in a sense, where the faction's not the same as it was previously. Um,
I love the addition of the Snake Knights, as I
yeah.
love all these new factions, and I want any excuse that, because I mean, right now, the BDP is one of our best chance to get sets with these factions. Who knows what Lego is going to be doing with them in the
Mhm.
future, but I can, I was very excited by that, even if other people are.
Yeah. I mean, it was almost a little too, like, it worked out really well that the torsos aligned so well from a color scheme standpoint, because
Yeah,
it was before, it was kind of like the tax collector torso being used as, like, this mercenary faction slash, like, bounty hunter guild type thing.
which is so
And it's like, oh no, but there's these snake knights that are, or the serpent knights that are coming out this, in a month or two, basically, I think, from when it was chosen as a finalist. But it was like, oh, this is like perfect. It's all the
yeah.
same colors. It's black and purple and yellow, and that'll be, I think people overall in general are going to say, we'd rather have this new faction than, making up a faction, in a sense. So, and then in general, there's creator 3-in-1 set that kind of goes alongside of it, in a sense, where that's already for the
Mm,
horse knights. Then the snake knights have, a home as well, in a
for
sense.
sure.
But yeah. And I think that generally too, though, you'll see, like, the castle fans are discerning, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you're designing something for BDP, like, there are some really cool ideas that people come up with, but there's also kind of some lore stuff that you got to keep in mind. Like, um, we were talking to Brickhammer about this when we did the Outlaw Forest Den. It was like,
Okay.
he had a handful of models that were that series that were all right there at the top. But, he was like, "Oh, I thought this one would have did better." And I think it was the toll bridge,
Okay.
I think, because he had the toll bridge as well. And it was like, yeah,
Right.
but you got to think about it from a story perspective. Like, it did well in voting because it was a beautiful model. But, like, I think most fans, this is a generalization because I don't have any data to back this up or anything, but it's, people will look at that model and say, well, but does it make sense that the wolf pack own a bridge? Like,
So
like, that's
I'll
not.
tell you now, right now, That was
Yeah.
my only issue with that set, was as a
Yeah.
fan of the lore or whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, I was like, well, this kind of doesn't make sense for the faction. And I now that you're saying it, I for the first time, I haven't done it in a long time, looked through the BDP sets for when 9 was getting announced, because I haven't done it in
Yeah.
so long, and I was like looking through it with CPA, and we were talking about it, and I noticed the number of times where I went, oh, this just doesn't make sense for the faction, and that's why it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
personally to me like not interesting. And so now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense why this set is getting picked over this, is because people just want stuff that makes sense or goes along. And with all that, my other question was, do you have any other, like, besides the stuff you've answered this fully, do you have
Yeah.
any other advice for people who are designing castle stuff, who want to get their castles, we're running out of time here, but who
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
their castles made into sets in BDP?
I think what we just talked about is make sure that a model aligns with what you would want as a fan, right? I
Right.
think this is what I tell all fan designers this that are participating in BDP. You should be the biggest fan of this model before you even start to design it,
Right.
in a sense. You should also figure out a price point before you start designing it too, because that's also pretty important. It's funny because internally we start with price point and like theme and all these things before we even design a model, right? And
Yeah.
BDP is almost the exact opposite, where it's like people will submit models and then we, based off of what the fan community chooses, we then assign a price to it.
Yeah.
Well, we can't dictate knowing, well, our fans going to really, I always use the example of a 4,000 part barn. Do people, and generally, well, say, the fan community uses 10 cents per part. We're below that if you look at it.
Okay.
But in general, we'll say a 4,000 part set has somewhere in between, depending on the types of elements that are used, somewhere between $300 and $400 in that range.
Yeah.
But let's just say 10 cents per part because that makes it easier to do the math on it. So if you do a 4,000 part barn, or do you want to pay $400 for it? And if you're the designer of that set and you say no, then I would say, would you pay $300 for it? If the answer is no, then I'm like, all right, you got to go lower then. So your part
Yeah.
budget should be 2,500 parts if you think 250 is the max for this. Um,
That's a really good point.
so part count, because I think the thing that we run into, and because the people, we're working with fan designers who are used to designing mocks, and in
Yeah.
mocks, when you go to conventions, we build in scale that is, there is no budget, there is no part count allotment. You can use parts that are maybe only once produced in 1979, and they're $400 a pop, or you can go with just 2x2 or 2x4 elements and be very creative with just that alone. So um the that that mindset needs to shift a little bit too when you're starting
Mhm.
to think about BDP, because we are realizing it exactly as it was designed, right? Where, for example, ideas, if you're submitting a model, I don't know per se exactly if this is how it works, but if you submit a 4,000 part model, they could come out with a 2,000 part model with
Yeah.
it, right?
We've seen that
Because it's
happen.
being
So
redesigned, right? In that
yeah.
sense, where it's like, we will go through our models, and for example, Thieves of Tortuga, I think we pulled like 300 parts out of the base. We saved like 300 parts in just the base because it was a little overbuilt for what it was. And we
Yeah.
can kind of share some of that insight, be like, okay, here's some areas you can save parts. Now take those 300 parts and go decorate the insides of all the buildings so they're all, spectacular.
Yeah.
And there's no, perceived weak spots in the model per se. So, we'll go through and basically give everyone, here's your budget, and then have fun with it, right? So I think at the end of the day is think about your model from a design standpoint of how many parts are in the model, and then does that reflect what you would hope it would be, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then what we talked about with like Castle, the leg up is, how do you do something that hasn't been done before? So I'm not saying that a Serpent Knight Castle is not going to be
Yeah.
successful because there's already one in BDP. but you're probably putting yourself at a disadvantage by designing a 4,000 part Serpent Knight castle, right? You could do
Sure.
something else Serpent Knight for sure, but you might want to reconsider if you're going fully at that.
It also sounds kind of like Castle fans need to branch out from just doing castles and do other buildings that, because that way because
Yeah,
you can do a 2,000 part or even a couple hundred part set that's something that's not a castle.
yeah,
You can hit those lower goals. So it's like, hey, if you are designing sets, maybe don't just do castles. Find fun things that you could add to the world.
yeah. I
Which
think there's been 4 faction specific. So Mountain Fortress,
Forcemen
Forest
is one.
Stronghold,
Yep.
Outlaw Forest Den, and Dustmark.
Yep.
But then there's been
You could
Sleepy Dragon
say,
Inn,
yep.
Siege Encampment, Medieval Seaside Market, and Alchemist Shop. So it's
Yes.
50-50, right? In the sense of
And I'd
50%
almost
like
say the Seaside Port is closer to the castle side than something new. But I get what I 100% get what
yeah,
you're
but it's
saying.
not yeah, I guess I'm thinking about like a faction specific home
Okay.
in a sense, in that it's like their main place. Even though I don't know that more Mount or Forest Stronghold really fits that either, because it's not like this is where all of the forestmen live. It just happens to be one of the places that they're using to ambush,
For
I
sure. I
guess.
mean,
Yeah,
there's the one behind me that's also, so I get what you're saying. It is definitely a bit more of a split when you think about it in that way.
yeah. But I guess in essence, though, I look at like Siege Encampment kind of hopefully showed a different path in the sense of
Yeah,
like these other types of medieval sets will do well and can be chosen, right? It doesn't need to be a faction specific base or castle or something like that. It could be an addendum or something like the lion the medieval seaside market is kind of an addendum to
yeah,
Lion Knight's Castle if you have it. Um, you have alchemy shop that can sit on a shelf or in a display right next to the medieval blacksmith, and I
and
think
now
the
then,
and yeah, and Sleepy Dragon Inn, I think will be right there. I mean, it's not as big as people think it is, but it's also
okay,
not a small model.
no,
The part count is definitely a little higher on it, but it's mostly because of smaller elements in that
mm,
standpoint. So because I don't know what the specific name is for like the cross hatch wall pattern that you see in a
okay,
lot of medieval sets, but that takes up a lot of elements, right?
that
So
is true.
and that is throughout the entire model. So there's a lot of elements that get used for that.
Okay,
But yeah, I mean, I've seen some videos talking about like the Sleepy Dragon Inn is much more like D&D type focused of the fantasy world versus castle, and I will tell you, it's that's not the direction at
to
least
to
that
me, it just
we're
seemed like the
progressing.
figures were that. Like if you pulled out the figures, it was like it looked like a tavern which you could use in your
Yeah,
town. The other complaint I've heard is it's really big compared to Light Knight's Castle, but it's like it's kind of I'd say the blacksmith, alchemist shop, and tavern are kind of their own sub theme. Where it's like, I mean, you're
yeah.
not going to put most of your city sets with a
Well,
modular
wasn't
because
Medieval Town Square? Medieval Town Square wasn't really in.
no, it's
It's not in scale either. Like I mean, castles are
yeah,
generally much smaller than they ever would be in a sense of
for sure.
like, when we go to conventions and you see castles that people are building, they're monstrous, right? Like, because
Yes,
that's what it would be. And so the castles themselves are really kind of out of scale. But I,
I,
space is always the biggest issue that we all
yes,
have, right? So
yes, yes.
unless you're blessed to live in the Midwest and have a basement, never knew. I grew up in
Or
Michigan
the
and I
East
never knew
Coast.
how fortunate I was. Now I live in Southern California and it's like every square inch of your apartment or house is like gold. So you can't you can't have space dedicated like you could in some other
Yeah.
parts of the country or world. So yeah. I get it where it's like,
Well, speaking of that, this final question, we definitely need to wrap up. This has been so
okay.
much fun. Um, One of the comments I got a lot was people had the idea of doing a BDP wave that's all smaller sets. Would that ever be something that like I know you probably can't talk too much about it, but like would that ever be something that Bricklink might be willing to do of like, hey, and we're gonna put a part cap and it's gonna be a lot lower to push fans to build smaller builds that are, more interesting
Mhm.
to have those people who do small builds have a better chance of winning that spot. I, yeah.
Y It's I will, it's a hard one to say because we
Okay.
are locked in, like, we have our production constraints in the sense of, like, the
Yeah.
2,500 parts, and we can't go beyond a certain amount of sets produced. Because I think if you were going that route, you would have to have, like, the maximum cap could be, uh, you would need a much higher number, right, to offset
Mm,
the the difference there, right? Because if we just produced if we produced 150,000, so let's just say 30,000 of each set. If we produced 150,000 sets that were all 400 parts, the overall production space that we would have used would have been like a small sliver because the time it takes to manufacture a 400 part set versus a 4,000
true.
part set, it's completely different. But then the numbers would be like, well, you used your production slot, but it's like, no, but we actually didn't in a sense because it's like there's still all this extra time. From a number standpoint, it looks like it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't know that it would be a lot of things to figure out on the other side of, like, the
which makes
feasibility
sense.
side of that. Yeah. I don't know, but I think those are the things though where it's like we will look at, each of the, um, all the feedback that we're getting and say, like, is this something where this is becoming a problem? Like the models are, there's so much feedback that we need to have a smaller model, or, um, I think generally what we see more of is, hey, I want to see another, like we keep seeing more castles, more castles, more castles, but
Yeah.
obviously we can't go beyond that. But it's like, it'd be nice to have another 2,000 part set to do this with, or
Mm,
I, I'm trying to think of, like, there's a possibility of, like, could we experiment for a series and say we want to we you could set it and say one of the models will be X amount of parts, and this one will be, the second set will pick something in the 1,400-ish part range, and
okay.
then just, like, guarantee it. But we've been trying to, and I think I've been relatively unsuccessful in lobbying for more models to be submitted in that part count range. Because if you watch every webinar, I ask for fan designers to submit models sub 1,400 parts because we are not seeing enough models in that range. A lot of people are submitting 4,000, 3,500, 4,000 part models, and we can only select so many of we can't select many of those, right?
Yeah.
um and we still haven't seen it. So I don't even know that I would be comfortable doing like, even if it was
Yeah.
possible, right? We're not even seeing enough models highly voted enough to even do that in a sense. So I guess that would be my challenge to the fan community is, like,
Yeah.
let's see some really good sub 1,400 part models. Like, when those come through, like, we love doing them. We love seeing them because it's like the models that have really stood out over the years, like they really scream up the voting in a sense where you might see a sub 1,400 break that top 10. That's something like the hot air balloon. Hot air balloon was,
Yeah.
like, literally it rose to the top. I mean, it was a very highly voted model for being how few elements it is. Like, those are the type of things we'd love to see. We'd love to see those types of things come through.
I saw this fantastic, the last one, it was a stagecoach for the
Yep.
Western,
Yep.
and I loved that. And I was
Mhm.
like, and the thing is, I was looking through and I felt like there was nothing that was that small that had as good of a quality. And so I was like,
Yep.
honestly, if you're looking for something to submit that's well, really good. Look at that. Look how they
Yep.
use parts and stuff. Because I would love personally to see more sets like that for Castle, for Western, for all of those.
Yep.
Because I genuinely think that there was some cool stuff done that's cheaper. It's just they're
Yeah.
very, yeah.
Yeah, I think and that is the it's like the post office and stagecoach or something like that, I think it was
Yeah.
called. Yeah, we worked with a fan designer in the office hours this summer,
Okay.
because that was one of the things where it's like, we want more small models like that. Like, I think this is also something to point out is that, like, we can't go and generate models. If we could, then you would probably see more small models, right?
Yeah.
But we are 100% reliant on the fan community to submit small models, and I'm sure there's a little bit of something in the back of everyone's head that says like, well, if I submit a small model, the payout isn't as big as if I submit a 4,000 part model, right? So you have a little bit of like a financial carrot, carrot on a stick kind of dangling in front of you. Be like, well, the bigger the model is, the better the payout would be if if it does get to that point. Um, but yeah, it's like I look at it and say, well, you have a better chance of being selected if you do a small model because
Mm.
we're not seeing as many small models come through, and the quality is maybe not as high
Yeah.
on some of those models, or they're not standing out from the crowd in a sense of
Yes.
how, small models can break that top 25, top 10, but they need to have that spark. They need to be something special, something unique, and then you'll see them up there. And so, let's see more models submitted because, generally we're the more models we're seeing, the higher the odds that we're going to get a handful of finalists, quality models that come through, or models that we like, yeah, that model's probably gonna have legs to get through the voting phase. Um, but you know,
Oh, and that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I mean, honestly, guys, from what I'm hearing, one, I want to now try to make my own small model to submit. And two,
yeah.
this means you guys should be trying to submit small models. I mean, honestly, I've been saying it for a while. We need small models. And hey, if you want some of these newer factions to be in a BDP set that you could get for cheaper, that's the way to go. I'm not saying
Yep.
castle ones can win, but like if you put enough smaller castle ones into there, you can possibly get one to win. But
Yep.
we have went very long, which I
I'm
not
sorry.
about
I'm
that.
sorry.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, it's all good. This is all such good information, and if it wasn't that, I know that I'm gonna hate myself for having to edit this later.
We don't
uh,
have to edit. You just push play.
there we go. But oh my god, Alex, thank you so much. This was so insightful into how this program works, into
Yep.
just every aspect of it. I definitely am walking away from this with a greater appreciation for the program than I did when I first started. So I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for being willing to talk with me and addressing some of these, I don't know, some negative feedback about the program. So
Hey, no,
yeah,
thank you. I appreciate the giving me the venue to discuss this and having an open conversation about it. I'm always like, I want to go out and have these conversations. I was part of the fan community, still am, and so I can understand some of these frustrations. So the more that I can come out and talk about these things, the better it'll be. I want, if you see me at a convention, we try to go to as many conventions as we can a year. We are always soliciting feedback. All of the things that we have done for the program or the changes that we've made over the last few series is directly because of fan feedback. Like, we are always looking for ways. Like, this is a fan program for fans. So like, whatever you're asking for, like, we're gonna, if it's technically feasible and we're seeing enough people that want it and it makes sense and it's going to improve the program, let's do it.
yeah,
And the worst thing is, like, let's say we try something and it doesn't work, then we'll just revert it, right?
yeah,
So,
makes perfect
yeah,
sense.
please keep providing the feedback with love. I appreciate the conversation. It's been
Is there a
wonderful.
spot where people can put feedback? Maybe like BDP website or something like that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. So we have an email address. It's bdpsupport@lego.com. So that's one way you can contact us. There's the forum on the BDP website. So we have a lot of comments there. We see comments on our social media. So if you're commenting on social media posts, that's totally good too. Um, I consume a lot of Bricklink related content, so it doesn't necessarily mean you need to come to us. I mean, it's like your video. I mean, I saw it and I was like, there's a lot of great points that are in here in the sense of like, maybe these are things that we haven't done a good enough job talking about. Or, like, oh, yep, there might be some misinformation there, but we can have a conversation about it, and,
Yeah.
and then hopefully others will learn from it as well.
And that's honestly, I almost deleted the video because I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much. But I loved what I found from that was so many people were talking about it,
Uh-huh.
having discussion, and I was learning so much from the fans that I was like, I don't want to take this down because I think it's so good to have these conversations. And if I don't know about it, you can bet that there are 5,000 other
Mhm.
people, or even more than that, who have no clue either. And
Yep.
if we don't want to push anyway, if you're a big AFOL, we don't want to push anyone away from this program. We want
Yep.
people to enjoy it. So again, thank you so much. And guys, go do those things. If you have suggestions, go contact Bricklink. Like that's the best way that you can get your word out there about stuff, and go submit stuff. I mean, when does Series 10 submissions start opening up?
So it's mid-January. I gotta
Okay.
look what the exact date is. I think it's the 19th. The
Okay.
19th is what sticks out to me. It's the third Monday of January, I want to say. So I think it's the 19th, whatever that Monday is. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and thank you for enjoying this tale from my archives.